So, any story about Facebook's fundraising journey is always entertaining, and how Accel invested in Facebook is no exception. Like many other VC firms, Accel struggled in the aftermath of the dot-com bubble. They were having trouble adjusting to the new wave of the internet and figuring out which companies would be everlasting and which were just a fad. In the pre 2000s era of venture, companies were founded by seasoned industry veterans moving slowly and surely, as learned from their long operating experience within large companies. However, in the dot com bubble, the founder archetype changed to fresh eyed founders hacking their way into a company and worrying about everything else later. The era of move fast and break things had begun, and Excel was a little too cautious. As we'll talk more about later, Excel missed companies like Skype and Flickr in the early 2000s, primarily due to concerns with the legality of the endeavors and the youth and recklessness of the founders. They didn't realize this was becoming the new normal in the startup world, and they'd have to adjust. Missing these deals made the Excel team realize that they had to start looking at the new wave of internet companies, which was defined by social networks. In 2004, Excel began looking at social network companies. They looked closely at blossoming names like Friendster and MySpace, but thought it was a little too much of a free for all based on all the prostitution and illegal activity that was apparently occurring on the seemingly lawless website frequently. So this time they made the right choice to pass. But Excel kept looking, and one partner, Kevin Ofusi, discovered a small website called The Facebook through a part time Excel scout enrolled at Harvard. I mean, side note, no wonder so many VCs hire scouts with strong networks. I mean, Excel made, as we'll see, multiple billions of dollars because of this part time scout at Harvard, this regular student at Harvard who was looking out for companies for Excel. I mean, that's insane. VCs definitely hire scouts with strong networks. They know that. Anyway, so Excel passed due to MySpace's and Friendster's just disorder, but they were fascinated by Facebook's nightclub like strategy of slowly onboarding networks of prestigious universities to make it a constantly high value product that very few people could access. The problem is, as we covered in the Sequoia episode, Mark Zuckerberg and Sean Parker, Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, Sean Parker, a very early advisor and senior employee, did not like VCs and they wanted nothing to do with them. And so Excel tried everything they could to get a meeting with Facebook, primarily, interestingly enough, using LinkedIn's Reid Hoffman, former PayPal employee, founder of LinkedIn, and prominent venture capitalist Reid Hoffman, who was a Facebook board member at the time. They tried to get in contact with the Facebook team through him, essentially being their mediator and the voice of their company, but never found success. The Excel team was constantly told that no VC would pay as much money as Facebook was worth, and Facebook didn't want to deal with the overbearing and dictating nature of venture capitalists. But eventually, they met with Matt Kohler, who was one of the first employees of Facebook. I believe he was in charge of growth and also a former very successful partner at Benchmark Capital. And so after meeting with Matt, Excel learned just the insane retention and growth numbers that Facebook was having. I mean, they were just in awe of these numbers, and they had never seen at such a level for any company that Facebook was showing. So eventually they convinced the team that they would be offered a term sheet. Excel would for sure give Facebook a term sheet at a very compelling valuation if they just came to the Excel office for a meeting with all of the partners. And so I'm very much glossing over why Excel invested in Facebook because, as I just hinted at, it was obvious that their numbers were ridiculous. Everyone knew about Facebook. Everyone knew it was incredible. Every VC wanted to invest in Facebook. I mean, even Sequoia was willing to take a meeting, even though it was a disaster from the start. Any VC was doing whatever they could to get into Facebook. I mean, there was no product in the world at that time that users loved more and that every user that wasn't given access at the time, wanted to have. Facebook was just masterfully rolling out the product on this campus by campus rate that mastered retention and immediate growth when expanding. It was remarkable. I mean, they go to a new campus, they instantly have 90+% of the students. That might be lowballing. 95+% of the students in a day. I mean, it was, and those students were coming back day after day after day. So it was just remarkable to see, I'm sure, at the time. What's interesting about this story is that Accel was the only VC firm to actually get the Facebook team to even consider a deal from a venture capital firm, let alone accept one. And before Accel met with the Facebook team, Sequoia partners and former CEOs Doug Leone and Mike Moritz warned Accel about the Facebook founding team's just insulting conduct, and that taking a meeting with them wouldn't even be worth it. They were never going to work with VCs. And again, those who have listened to the Sequoia episode can completely understand why, because that meeting is just a disaster. Or if you've seen The Social Network, they talk about this, but maybe go listen to my podcast episode. A little more entertaining than The Social Network, I think. But anyway, the Accel team didn't care about the founders' historically erratic behavior because they could see the VC industry was becoming a founder-led industry. No more would the venture capitalists dictate the terms. Exceptional internet companies with incredible profitability potential were starting. And as we touched on in the Kleiner Perkins episode, Sergey Brin and Larry Page of Google showed the next generation of founders that they could take the leverage in the relationship if their company was as remarkable as Facebook and Google was. It's a high bar, but if you hit that bar, founders are in charge. And some VCs were reluctant to recognize that, but Accel could see that tide turning after missing companies like Skype and Flickr. And so for these exceptional founders and companies, VCs needed them more than they needed VCs. And Accel recognized this. And so to secure a deal with Facebook, they understood that the founder was the smartest person in the room. And they made sure that Zuckerberg knew that. They felt that way. And founding partner of Accel, Arthur Patterson, has a great quote on this concept of just recognizing and emphasizing the fact that the founder is the smartest person in the room and making that clear to everyone involved. He once said, quote, "To have a successful career in venture capital, you've got to be someone that figures out who the smartest guy in the room is on any particular deal, as opposed to thinking you're the smartest guy." The problem a lot of really brilliant people in the business have had over time is that they're used to being the smartest guy in the room, and they're used to making those decisions. And they don't have the objective of finding someone smarter than they are, end quote. And so I'm not saying Sequoia lost the deal because they thought they were smarter than Zuckerberg. Like I said, that deal was doomed from the start. But what I am saying is that many other VCs in this era, again around 2004, 2005, still thought they had the control. They still thought they had all the leverage. They thought founders without operating experience couldn't scale companies without the advice and the guidance of venture capitalists, so the founders would have to come crawling to them. But as we said, that era was becoming extinct. Accel had a very cards on the table approach. They knew Facebook was special and they wanted to invest, and they made that very clear. So they had to sell their services, and sucking up, for lack of a better word, to the Facebook team was the correct strategy to intrigue the anti-VC mindset of the Facebook teams to get them to consider a deal. And also, Facebook was not super interested in meeting with a VC because they had an offer on the table. Only it wasn't from a venture capitalist. It was from someone you would not expect at all. Interestingly enough, Facebook had an offer from the Washington Post for $10 million at a $60 million valuation to lead their Series A, the Washington Post. I mean, I can't begin to explain how insane things would have been had the Washington Post owned about 17% of Facebook. I mean, maybe by the IPO, they would have been diluted down to, say, conservatively 5%. Could have even been 10%. I mean, who knows? The Washington Post might have done follow-on investing, but let's say 5%. That 5% in 2013, when Facebook IPO'd, would have been worth about $3 billion. The Washington Post would have had a $3 billion stake in Facebook if they had led their Series A. And what's so crazy about that is in 2013, Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post for $250 million, 12 times less than what their Facebook ownership would have been worth. It's just an outrageous story. I can't believe the Washington Post almost led Facebook Series A and almost became a $3 billion worth of shareholder in the company, and instead, unfortunately, got acquired for $250 million. You know, that's just crazy. But anyway, so Facebook almost went with the Washington Post because the Washington Post assured Zuckerberg that they would just be a check, and sure, they'd be there if they needed them and help with media, content moderation, publishing, because they are a news network. Facebook's kind of a news platform. They could help a little bit, but if the Facebook team didn't want help, the Washington Post would let them do whatever they wanted, and they would never hear from them. Once again, appealing to the anti VC team. And so to counter this, very intriguing investment, Accel offered $10 million at an $80 million valuation, allowing Facebook to retain about 4.5% more of the company, which at IPO was worth a little over $4.5 billion. So it's a lot of value the Accel team was willing to sacrifice to land this deal. It was a hard decision for the Facebook team, actually. $10 million, a $60 million valuation for the Washington Post, someone who will let you do whatever you want, just as the Facebook team wanted, or $10 million at an $80 million valuation with a VC, yes, but you keep 4.5% more of the company. So it's a hard decision, and one that apparently had Zuckerberg on the floor of a restaurant bathroom in sitting cross-legged position, sobbing over the stress of the situation. And again, before you make fun of him, he's only 20 years old at the time. For those who forgot, this is again 2005. He's 20 years old when all this is going on. So another crazy aspect of the story. Any story involving Facebook is insane. So that's what Mark was going through. But the final nail in the coffin in landing this deal for Accel was actually Mark Zuckerberg's respect for former partner Jim Breyer. He just really admired Breyer's calmness, confidence, smoothness, and just challenging situations. And Zuckerberg knew that Breyer had an exceptional track record of guiding startups to success, which are a few traits that co-founding partner Arthur Patterson considers vital to being a good VC. He once said, quote, "The entrepreneur should understand his industry and market in a vertical way better than anybody else, but the venture guys should bring horizontal best practice views to that individual and help that individual. I would say you try to get them to do what's in their own self-interest, but it has to be their idea. The most effective venture capital guys are the guys that are able to form really close relationships with the entrepreneur and help that guy avoid a lot of mistakes and reinforce naturally good analytical judgment and get him to move a little bit faster." First of all, I'm sorry for saying guy every word. He just said guy a lot. He's old. He doesn't understand, women can be VCs and founders too, I guess. But regardless, founders are the idea person. The founders are in control. The best venture capitalists are there to guide if needed and just fill in the little holes of doubt or confusion that the founders are feeling. That's their job. Plug the holes. So to win this deal, Accel made it clear to Zuckerberg and the Facebook team that, they were in charge. Zuckerberg was in charge. They had all the leverage, and the Accel team would simply be there to help avoid any mistakes and just reinforce good judgment, when they need it. When Zuckerberg needed that push to do a large acquisition or to go into a new market that he was hesitant about, the Accel team would be there to just nudge him along, tell him it's going to be okay. Because again, he's 20 years old. So I think the Accel team just expertly teetered on this line to essentially do what many VCs do now, which is just support when needed, but otherwise stay out of the way. Again, that was not the norm back in 2004. And so Zuckerberg felt that Jim Breyer and the Accel team would give him that type of partnership, one that Zuckerberg was really excited about after being so against venture capital. I mean, incredible job by the Accel team just through skill, luck, intense pursuit, some more luck, and just whatever God they thanked, Accel led Facebook's Series A round, and as I said, invested $10 million for 12.5% of the company. And so eventually Facebook would explode into the public markets at the highest IPO valuation of all time at that time in 2012 when they went public, at a $104 billion valuation. And they held that title until 2014 when Alibaba surpassed them with just an egregious $231 billion IPO valuation. I mean, that doesn't even make sense. But yeah, $104 billion valuation for Facebook. And at the IPO, Accel owned about 11.4% of the company. So I don't know for sure. They likely invested somewhere between like $30 and $60 million total. It could be less, it could be more. There were many large rounds Facebook raised later on, but those rounds were ridiculous. I mean, there were times where someone would invest $1 billion in Facebook for like 2% of the company. So there was very large rounds, very little ownership being sold. So I'm not too sure how much Accel had to invest, but let's say they invested $45 million total. That means they multiplied their total capital invested by 266 times for an ownership at the IPO worth $12 billion. $45 million to $12 billion. One of the largest, if not the largest. I mean, this is up there with Sequoia's Airbnb, with A16Z's Coinbase. Accel's Facebook is right there. $12 billion. Insane. So, investors, sometimes to achieve one of the greatest investments all time, you have to exude confidence, experience and good judgment, show that you are very capable and a quality supporter. But most of all, sometimes you have to be just that, a supporter, and let the founder run his or her company to their terms and make that very clear at the inception of the partnership.